Thank you. I know that I'm the only one between you and land. And we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, that is corruption and doing business in Latin America. But I don't want you depressed. I want you talking about this in the last time and how you could be an actor to fight corruption, especially in Latin America. But what happened with corruption? Corruption doesn't rest. And even with COVID, when we were living like the worst situation, even of the world that all our life, we could see cases of corruption, I think that in every country in Latin America, and with sensitive topics, hospitals, with the machines to breathe, hospitals, etc. So what is happening with corruption now in the world? Corruption is increasing. And this is increasing because the democracy is decreasing, and at the same time, we have more leaders of countries with more power. So we don't have the check and balance and the accountability. So there are a lot of countries that is very difficult because even people, if people see something, they can't do anything because all the power is in one person. At the same time, we are living the biggest economic crisis of all the times. And what happened with that? And maybe even with our companies, that the fight to survive is too strong that we are willing to do anything to survive. So this is a big risk for corruption. The inequality is rising in the world, especially in Latin America. And what happens when we have inequality? Populist leaders go to power. And when we have populist leaders, usually we have corruption behind them. And we are living the crisis of trust, I think that the biggest of all the times. And at the same time, what happens when you don't trust? The institutions become weak. And what happens with that? If a country doesn't have strong institutions, you don't have the check and balance and the accountability for doing something to fight corruption, for example, justice. At the same time, and we have been talking about this all morning, about technology. Technology is a big tool to fight corruption. But at the same time, we have seen the technology companies, they are growing very fast, and they are having too much power. So we also depend on them. What happened, for example, and this is hypothetical, please don't repeat this, but if Microsoft or Google decide to be corrupt, they are bigger than some countries. So we depend on how they behave, about how the world is going to behave. At the same time, the fake news are rising. We have seen with COVID that every country focusing themselves, so the international institutions are losing power also, and usually these institutions are the one fighting corruption. At the same time, we have been seeing an increase of drug trafficking, money laundering, and a lot of illegal activities. And now, what is going to happen with our data? Because I remember when we said, no, the data and the personal information is the gold of the future, but the future is now. And now we are giving all our data. And what is going to happen when someone wants to use this against us? So this is the scenario. It's not to you to cry. But I think that it's important that we talk about this topic, because what happened in Latin America, and I think that in all the world, what happened is that we talk about corruption, but we always think that this is a public sector problem. And we said, no, yes, because the politicians are so corrupt, but not me, not my company, so we are okay. But yes, we have this big problem about politicians. But actually what I've been working for the last 14 years is try to make companies understand that they are on the other side. So it's impossible to fight corruption if we don't stop this from the private sector. Because we can't put our hands on fire for all the politicians, but we as companies can do things. And this gives us this question. Are companies good or bad? And usually when we see a company that pay a bribe or is involved in a crime, we said, no, because that is a bad company. But believe me, I think in the good being of companies. And what happened with this, when we see maybe some bad companies, maybe 5% of the companies in the world are born to do bad things. As the taxi company of Pablo Escobar, for example, or like the companies that are made to make money laundry, or they are born for bad things. But usually, 95% of companies are born to be good. But then, why we see this kind of scandal? Why we see a company that, as Goldman Sachs, for example, paying bribes in Asia, or Polo paying bribes in Argentina? What happened with this? When we see this, these companies weren't born to do bad things. But all these companies were involved in big scandals of bad practices, crimes, bribery, etc. So, I'm not a psychologist, but I need us to understand why this happened. And this happened because companies are not a brick and mortar building. Companies are people. We are companies. And what happened with people? What happened with us? What happened with our brain? When something of this happens, it's because we auto-justify our actions. How many times have you heard this kind of phrase, like, that's just how things are done, or everyone else is doing it, or it's the only way to do business in this country, or if I don't do it, my competitor is going to gain? A lot of times. And I hear this kind of auto-justifications every day. And it's because our brain is protecting us. Usually we think that people that pay a bribe, for example, is sleeping bad, but it's not like that. People that pay is auto-justifying their actions and saying, I'm not the bad one. And I have heard this for friends and a lot of people, and they told me, no, I'm the small company, and the big company, they have the power, and if they ask me for a bribe, I pay because I don't have the power to say no. I said, but be careful, because the one that is benefiting for this transaction is you. So you are the one that could say no or denounce the person that is asking you for the bribe. The big company is not benefiting for you paying a bribe because it's for one people in the company. They don't want that person in the company, neither. But one thing is this, and the other one is this. It's about incentives. How many companies have ethic codes, policies, controls, manuals, etc., and they said, we behave good. But where are the carrots put? They are on the last line of the Excel, of the last line of the budget, of the last line of the result. And what I put this picture? How many of you have kids? Okay, almost more than the half. But what are we doing with our kids? When they go to school, believe me, there is not a kid in the world that don't know that copy in an exam or in a test is bad. If you ask your child and said, it's good to copy, they are going to say, no, it's bad to copy. And they learn that very little. But then, when we ask them, or how we evaluate them, we ask, oh, what grade did you have? What was the last result, the final outcome? So even if your kids know that copying in a test is bad, what is their brain thinking at that moment? In the moment when they know, oh, if I go home with a bad grade, my parents are going to punish me, or they're going to leave me without TV, without PlayStation, without cell phone, etc. But if I go home with a good grade, they are going to say congrats, they are going to be happy, and everyone is going to be good. So in that moment, even if that child knows that copy is bad, all the incentives are put on the final result. And a lot of times we did this because it's the way that we have to measure. But how many times do we ask our kids, how many hours did you study? Or did you study even if they have a good grade or bad grade? In companies, it's exactly the same. If we are not able to measure the how we are doing business, or if our people is following the processes, is following the controls, or is following the way that we want to do business, it's going to be almost impossible for this not to happen. Because we are telling them, oh, we are ethics and we do business in the right way, but the question that I'm going to ask you at the end of the day is, tell me the money. Tell me your sales, tell me your budget, tell me your cost decreasing, etc. So this is very important to know, to put the incentives. And I think that all companies should work on this, especially now with technology, because now it's very easy to have the information. And all the things that we were talking in the morning can be applied here also, how we are measuring the results. And because of this, because corruption actually and money laundering and crimes actually exist from companies, is that countries create new laws and new regulation. And I think that all of us has been seeing an increase of the regulation. Maybe every month we have a new law, and it's like everything needs to be in a law. Now it's happening with artificial intelligence, with cybersecurity, with corruption, with everything. Because I said we don't trust companies. So we need to put them all the rules here. And what is happening also? Every country create their own laws. But almost all these laws, and I'm going to focus in the anti-corruption laws, are focused on the U.S. law, that is the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. What this law actually says? This law said if any company that has a relationship with the U.S., that doesn't matter if this is a U.S. legal entity or not, but if you have a bank account here, if you have clients here, if you have any contact with the country, the Department of Justice of the U.S. is going to follow you and it's going to go against you. And you need to prove that you were doing everything to prevent corruption for this not to happen. And we had seen almost all the cases that I told you before were under the FCPA law. Even the FIFA. FIFA is not here in the US, but they follow all the money and all the corrupt acts because they had meetings here in the US. So what this law said, and the different, or all the countries that have this kind of law, they are based in the same one, said, if you want to prevent, because we know that you can't put your hand on fire for all your employees, but if you want to defend yourself, you need to have compliance program. How many of you have heard the word compliance before now? Okay, almost everyone. I'm relieved. But usually, when you hear the word compliance, and I know by myself, because when I said, I work in compliance, people say, that's bureaucracy. This is so boring. Nobody wants to talk with me because they think that I'm bored because I work in compliance. But what is actually compliance is how you are doing things. And all this is not just comply with the law. It's how you are doing business. And this FCPA and the Department of Justice of the U.S. said you need to have compliance programs that follow like this kind of directives. First, need to start from the top. So all the senior management, the board members, the CEO, owners, etc., should agree with this. Then we have some policies and procedures. But all the people think that there are policies and procedures like you invent or you create for this. But usually, and for me, compliance are the policies and procedures that companies already have. Companies have this to do business, like payment procedures, human resources procedures, or different kind of policies that you create not to prevent crime, but to do business, actually. But if you put all these policies and you see how this policy is helping me to prevent this kind of risk, also you are doing compliance. You need a risk assessment, train your people, and talk. And this year, the Department of Justice of the US is putting a strong point of this on the incentive policy. For the same that I told you before. Because you can set everything, but then if you are putting your carrot just on the final outcome, you are not doing compliance. Because you are telling your people, yes, read this, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the final grade of the test. Then due diligence, etc. And this is how compliance programs usually are. You need a hotline, but you need to have like the structure, or you need to know how you are preventing risk. Later, we are going to hear about cybersecurity, and it's the same with cybersecurity. But what happened? A lot of companies, and especially big companies, have compliance programs. All the companies that I told you before had compliance programs. But it's not so easy to comply with the compliance program because nobody is monitoring or seeing that the program is being complied. And one employee of the company, or maybe now it's going to be one bot or one, but can ruin the company forever and the reputation. And what happened with this? Because it's not just the legal matter. All this legal part could be really long. But it's the reputation of the name. And today, with the internet, as we were hearing in the panel before, this is spread really fast also. And we have seen a lot of cases. But what happened, and this is data from us, working with more than 150 companies in Latin America. But usually, in Latin America especially, companies don't receive any denounce or any inquiry or any question even on the hotlines. And why? Because people don't want to denounce. They said, this is not my problem. They teach me not to look where it's not my topic. And they are really scared of represalias or to have something. The training, companies are training people, but people is not listening. It's saying, oh, compliance is so bureaucratic, and so they are not training them with real examples. The due diligence, for example. Companies have policies about due diligence, but they are not following them. Or companies have policies about interaction with public functionaries, but they are not following them. So it's really important when you have a compliance program, actually follow the compliance program, because if not, it's not going to be useful to defend the company in front of any local authority or even the US authority. I want to tell you some cases so you can see that this is real. But this is, sorry that is in Spanish, but I didn't have the picture in English, but a lot of you can understand what is there. But what happened? So Kimmits is a Chilean company. It's a big mining company. And they paid to all the politicians, almost all the politicians in Chile, for a long period of time, more than 10 years. But when people, and this is a public company, so all the Chilean people actually has money there for the pension funds. So it's a really, really big company. And they were paying to all the politicians. When the case was discovered, this company has also has a subsidiary here in the US and is in the trade market. So what happened? The DOJ went and said, "Oh, you were committing bribes." They paid more than $15 million in bribes or like pays to the politicians in Chile. What happened with them? They said, "Oh, but we have a compliance program. Follow for everyone, except the CEO." And the CEO, I think that he was thinking, oh, but I'm going to save the company, or maybe save the board members. But he said, oh, no, but I had a petty cat fund of $10 million a year, and I decide what to do with that money. And I decide that politics is very good for the country, so I pay to them. because I wanted a better politicians to. He was paying to have, and what the Department of Justice of the U.S. said, no, you were paying bribes. They agree in a settlement of $30 million, and they also had a lot. I think that they still have a lot of or different settlements with different actors, especially the investors. But he said, oh no, this is me. Compliance program doesn't matter if it's not following by the CEO or by the high administration. If they have a petty cut of $10 million and they pay whatever they want, the company is at risk. So be very careful with this, because it could happen. Just one person was the CEO of the company, but just one person. And the company had really, really legal problems after this. This is a company that everyone knows. Maybe some of you are wearing their clothes. But what happened with Ralph Lauren? They were exporting merchandise or goods to Argentina, and the custom government functionaries said, oh, but you need to pay me to go into the country. And they pay. And I think that, and this is a big company, a U.S. company, so with all the U.S. compliance regulations and everything. But I think that they were saying, oh, but this is how you do business in Argentina. And we are doing, and I'm sure that the people that pay, or maybe the people that take the decisions of this, said, oh, but we are doing good for Argentinian people. Because if we don't pay, they are not going to be able to wear our clothes, everything, or to be good. So if this is a cost, okay, we are doing this for Argentinian people. We are paying. And this happened a lot. I said, oh, but this is how you do business in Argentina, so we pay. Then, this is maybe you never heard of this company. It's a Chilean company, but this is an ongoing corruption scandal. But it's very good because the owner, the one who pays the bribes, is talking. So it's very funny, the things that he said about how he was committing bribes. This is a light company and works with municipalities, and also a company with investment here from the U.S. The International Development Bank put money on them and everything. But they said, oh, better than do marketing and do commercial strategies and sales strategy and hire a sales representative and all the things that we do to do business, it's better to find the right person who is willing to pay to have me as to whom I can pay to have me as a client. So he did an amazing business, working with almost all the municipalities in Chile. And now that he's talking, he's saying, no, this was very easy. I went to the municipality, I see which one was the person in charge of this with the decision power. Then I invite them for lunch, and I ask, how much? How much it costs to be your client? So then they grow the business very fast, so fast that the International Development Bank took money of them. And then when the case was discovered, and was discovered just because it was a new mayor, and she said, oh, why they're the only ones because it's a light company, it's like everyone can do this. But why we have just one supplier in the bid? And all the basis for the bid, for everything, were made for them. So then they were the only one, and they won almost every municipality. So this happens. And this is what is the message that I want to leave with you. This actually happened, and happened more than we think. What the Department of Justice of the United States says about compliance program said, need to be well implemented. Doesn't matter that you have everything, and even could be worse. If you have everything right up, but you don't follow that, and something happened, they are going to tell you, you can't tell me that you didn't know that this was bad because you have it here. And this all that we are asking is this work on practice. So it's not difficult to have a compliance program. It's just if you worry of how you are doing business and you are able to create evidence of this, then you are going to be able to prove that you were doing. What happened with the FCPA and which ones are the main departments that you need to look? Suppliers. In that Sokimich case that I told you before, all the money, because it was a petty cut, but still they need to prove or they need like the counterpart to take the money out. All were with false suppliers. Because he said to their politicians' friends, okay, I need an invoice, I need something to give you the money because I need to make everything or the both side of the assets there and everything fit. And they create false companies to be their false suppliers without giving any counterpart, but actually that this is the way that money go out of companies. So be careful with this. The other one is human resources. You can hire people that doesn't do anything just to have people in your payroll, but you can be paying bribes through that. So it's very important. The accounting controls that everything that is in your account statement, it's actually fit and it's real. Also, the relationship with public servants. When you are working with the public sector, you need to be very worried and leave a trace of all your transactions. Also, the affiliate companies, and this happened a lot. And I heard this last week from an investor. I said, when I'm doing business or when I'm putting money in companies in Latin America, I know that something is going to happen with corruption. So what we tell them, all the risk areas or all the risk activities, better hire someone to do it. And I said, but it's the same. It's like exactly the same. You are just saying, I don't want to see this. But you are working with a company that is doing this for you. And you know, but you don't want to be in the focus of the Department of Justice of the U.S., so you are telling, leave other company to do it. But they are telling, if an affiliate company or if you are hiring someone or other company to do the bad things, we are going to go after you either way. And general policies about anti-corruption, gift, trainings, etc. More than this, because I don't have too much time, I want to focus in my last topic, but monitoring is crucial. If you are going to have policies, you should monitor that your policies are being followed. But I want to finish with this because this is humans, this is people, and it's from an article that is called Good Intentions Bad Outcomes from the World Economic Forum. But this is very simple or to explain how we behave. This the square said, there is people with bad intentions and people with good intentions. But what happened were people with bad intentions that are able to behave bad. This is a vice-based organization, as the telecom case that I was telling you. What happened with people with good intentions behave bad? It's because ignorance. So, and this is very risky because all the examples that maybe the Polo or the Ralph Lauren case that I told you is in that square. Maybe they were saying, oh, we have a really good intention that is selling the Argentinian market, and we pay because we are good. That is ignorance. But what happened with people with bad intentions behave good? It's because compliance. It's because you had policies, controls, and you actually, and people couldn't take the money out of the company because you have all the controls. But how you do to people to good intentions to behave good? And said you need a value-based organization. This is culture. So this is more than compliance. You need a good culture in your organization because always if people want to go against a policies, they can do it. And they said to do this, you need to recognize the individual ethics and cognitive bias, training employees to recognize this, training with real examples, and Also build a psychological safety in your organization. Understand the role of incentives that we were talking before, and try to work with them in real examples and put them on different situations so they can be part of this. And the second one is designing a more holistic approach to organizational ethics and leadership. So for this, you need the high top organization. You need to work with the board or the owner or the CEO, encourage the ethical leadership and tow it inside the organization. We are always giving awards to the commercial manager or the salesperson that had more revenues in the last period, but how many times we are giving awards to the more ethic employee? Improve the organizational oversight, the diversity and inclusion, review the mission, strategy, and purpose, and measure the stakeholder trust. This article, and that is a link, but actually is very, focus in the stakeholders. If your stakeholders, if your suppliers, your clients, your employees are saying something, maybe it's because something is happening. They have the pulse of your company, or if something bad is happening, better than you sometimes. So this is it, but it is important. It's not just compliance department. A lot of times I hear, oh no, but this is for compliance people, or I have these lawyers. This is for the lawyers. This is not for me. This is for all the company. And every department has a grain of sand for this. So thank you, and just remember this. Compliance is not bureaucracy, but compliance is focusing how things are done and not just in the what. It's focused on the how. Thank you.
Thank you, Susana. So I've got like 5 questions in my head. I'll reduce it to one, and then Mr. Loynd's got one too. But then we'll go eat. But what occurs to me, and believe me, I support and endorse everything you're saying. But I do have to ask: the DOJ does not have unlimited resources. So my question for you is: I totally understand the headline grabbing pursuit of all those big companies. But when it comes into the smaller tier, give us an understanding of how much the DOJ is going to be looking at companies that are $50 million companies out of Latin America. What and sort of within that thought is, because you did say something about the DOJ paying more attention to certain parts of their rule book. What's your sense of their, the intensity of how closely they're looking in these areas for the smaller tier companies?
That is a very good question, because everyone said, oh, but I'm a smaller company, so nobody is looking at me. What happens is with these things happen with smaller companies, they are not on the newspaper. But the authorities follow them either way. And maybe we don't know, but they disappear because the highest penalty for this is the death or the penalty of the death sentence. So a lot of time that disappear or they couldn't pay, so they need to broke. So it's true that the DOJ is not looking for these cases, but if in your country you are in any newspaper related to a scandal of this, believe me that they are going to follow you. And they have, and in the more riskier countries, they have people there. They have in Mexico, they have in Argentina, they have in Colombia, they have people there from the DOJ that is working on those countries. So don't feel safe because you are smaller. Maybe if you are smaller, you are not going to be in the newspaper, but they are going to follow you anyway because they are looking for this kind of scandals. So this is their job. But the message is you don't need to do this because the law. You need to do this because it's good.
Yeah. Just a quick question. God bless the DOJ, but as an American, I'm curious if we flip it, what is the perception in the Nearshore and South America region of the United States as far as corruption goes? In other words, who's watching the watchers?
That is a good question, but I'm in my visa process, so I don't know. but actually, I think that, yes, I think that here is also corruption if you compare, but in Latin America is much more. But I think that we use or we need to see this in every country. It's not just the most risky countries, but it's true that sometimes we like those cases. And in Europe, it's exactly the same. And they are looking to Africa, and in Europe, no, Africa is too corrupt because companies there have inversions in Asia, and here is Latin America. And there is much more, and maybe not so sophisticated. But of course, that corruption is anywhere.